Hey everyone, welcome to another week of Dentistry Unmasked. I'm Pam Maragliano-Muniz, Chief Editor for Dental Economics, and with me every week.
Hey Pam, David Rice. Good to see you, friends. Welcome back. And Pam, we've got like a double down day. I'm excited.
Oh my gosh. So last night, anybody who knows me knows I love me a really crappy reality series. And last night I was watching Married at First Sight. So if you don't know the show, the title kind of tells you what it's about. So experts pick out people who are finding love and they meet each other on the altar, they get married, and then we watch the train wreck ensue. So last night, there was a group outing, like a weekend retreat kind of thing. And it turned out like these two couples that like really weren't doing so well, like the guy from the one couple and the girl from the other couple decided to get together and pull like a total robbery here. And so the one woman is like kind of onto it, but she didn't want to seem crazy. And then the husband from the other side like was totally blindsided. But so then the woman who was kind of onto it and she was suspecting something was going on
Uh-huh.
pulls the guy who's clueless, and then all of a sudden, like he starts thinking about it, and you can literally watch the light bulb go off in his head. And so now he's like throwing things and punching things because now his wife is cheating on him with some other woman's husband. So it got me thinking about dentistry. Like I always bring things back to dentistry, right? Like there's never any real surprises, right? In this life. Like I think when we look back on things and it's in the rearview mirror, we're like, I wish I paid more attention to this or something else. So that's what brings me to our amazing guests today. We've got embezzlement investigators with us, David Harris and Brittany Coiro. Welcome, you guys.
Good to be with you.
So let's talk about this. So you think about embezzlement, and I feel like you could almost fall into one of those two camps that I just described. Like you think something's going on, but you don't want to seem crazy, or you don't want to rock the boat, or you're just not sure and you don't want to be wrong. Or you're just like totally clueless altogether. Like what are you finding when dentists reach out to you?
Well, maybe I'll start. The clueless ones in your story tend not to reach out to us because, of course, they don't know they have a problem. The people who call us are the suspicious ones, and yeah, they start with, I hope I'm not crazy about this, but I'm seeing something in my practice that makes me wonder.
So
What?
what does that look like? Like do they are so like how bad does it have to be for them to be suspicious?
Mm-hmm.
Brittany?
So, yeah, I mean, it's funny. So, when I do my investigations, there's some practices that I've been investigating, and I'm like, everything is spot on, but they heard from a friend who my friend was embezzled from, and I don't want to be embezzled from. So, they sort of are calling us to just cover their bases. Other times, they're just hemorrhaging money, and they're like, why am I not making money? So, sometimes it's really, really bad before they finally call us.
How do you approach the ones that are hemorrhaging really, really bad? Because I'm sure there's a major element of emotion for them, feeling taken advantage of, number one, and maybe embarrassed. Like, how did I let this happen?
Dentistry has a culture of accountability. So pretty much from the day you entered dental school, you heard from somebody that if it happens in your office, no matter what it is, it's your fault. And I totally understand that when we're talking about clinical stuff. In other words, if your practice has hygienists and somebody picks your hygienist chair to have a heart attack in, you're going to be judged forever on how you responded to that. And in my mind, that makes sense. What dentists do, though, David, is they hold themselves to that same standard for what happens in non-clinical parts of their practice, and I think that's unrealistic. And I know Brittany's has had this experience too, but about once a week, I have to talk somebody off a ledge. And sometimes I'm not being all that figurative. They're very upset about this. It's somebody they've chosen to trust, who they've let into that small circle of people who they work with. And in response to that, this person's used that trust to steal from them. It's really hard. And I have to tell them, and it's hard, and their inclination is to self-blame.
Mm.
Especially when somebody sees the pattern. So let's say, for example, that you allow a staff member to take the deposit to the bank, and eventually you find out that not all the money that left your practice arrived at the bank. The temptation of a dentist at that point is to kind of smack themselves in the head and say, well, if only I had made the bank deposits myself, that wouldn't have happened. And the problem with that kind of thinking is that it's an oversimplified model of how a thief thinks. And if my first plan is to steal from your deposit and you frustrate that because you take the deposit to the bank yourself, that doesn't make me give up my plan to steal from you and join the church choir. I'm going to think of another way.
Well, that brings me to my other question. That's one way to steal, but there's actually countless ways that you can be embezzled from, right? Like as simple as taking stamps, right? I mean, that's still kind of robbing the practice. It's not yours and you're taking it. But also, I mean, credit card machines. I know, Brittany, you've told me, some crazy stories that like don't even occur to me. I think you could rob from me right now. Like, I have no idea. Like, it's crazy. But the amount of things that people think of is just astounding.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's like you said, you can be stealing stamps, you can be stealing time, just how somebody goes about it. And there's ways that if if the owner's not verifying, then it's very easy to steal. But there's other ways that where, the employee, they can be hiding what they're stealing. So that you could be receiving your day sheet at the end of the day and everything matches. And so they're sort of going through other concealment methods to steal from you.
So prevention, obviously, probably a pretty good practice, and maybe we can't prevent everything, but I'm guessing you guys have some best practices that we should be following on a daily basis, weekly basis, monthly basis. Like, what are some of those top tips?
I'll give you three things, and then I'll invite Brittany to maybe join in and add on what she'd like to say. But to me, David, there are three things that have to happen. The first thing is you need to check your day end report every day before you go home. Letting those pile up somewhere and then, sort of batch processing them on Friday won't work. So before you go home, you need to look at your day sheet, and you need to look at it with a bit of a critical eye. Did everything that I saw, is what I'm seeing on that day sheet consistent with how I remember today? And does it make sense? So for example, if you're looking at your hygienist work and your policy is that people get radiographs annually, then if your hygienist saw 12 patients today, there should be somewhere probably between 4 and 6 sets of x-rays. And if that's not the case today, okay, maybe the sample size is small. But if I go through 4 or 5 days like that and I'm seeing 1 or 2 films a day, that doesn't make sense. So step one is your day end report. And I'll also mention that you need to print it yourself. If you allow somebody to print reports and give them to you, selective reporting is a door that's pretty wide open. The second thing you need to do, and Brittany touched on this a minute ago, is you need to match up the money. In other words, do collections according to your practice management software line up with bank deposits. And if you don't do that, then the dumbest, laziest thief on the planet could successfully steal from you. So that needs to happen. The conventional wisdom was that you did that every day. I would rather see doctors do that once a month. In other words, take your monthly reporting and compare it to your monthly bank deposits rather than trying to do that every day. And then there's one more thing that goes in between these two, which I call articulation. And as soon as I say that to dentists, they're picturing the mandible and the maxilla and the relationship they should have with each other. In a financial sense, articulation means this. If your practice was open 15 days last month And in one hand, you have 15-day end reports that you've printed and looked at and put your initials on, so you know that's the one you saw. And in your other hand, you have a month end report. Then the total for three big numbers, which are fees, adjustments, and payments for the 15, should be exactly the same as for the one. What articulation does is it prevents anything from kind of squirting by you when somebody comes in on a weekend and they do some transactions in your accounts that they don't want you to see.
Great point.
So those are the big three for me. And now I'll shut up and let Brittany talk.
And I think one recurring theme here is, trust but verify. I think that's huge. I say that all the time. Managing a practice myself, I say, you need to have somebody check me. You can't just put blind faith in me because I could be. You trust me, yes, wholeheartedly, but at the end of the day, someone needs to be checking, the person, the office manager, whoever is handling that money for your practice. Another big thing is the rights in the computer. Again, as a manager, I add employees all the time. And it's so easy to just say, oh, they need rights to XYZ. I'm just going to hit select all. But no one should be having every single right to your dental software. That is a huge red flag to me.
That's a great point. So what should dentists be selecting for their hygiene team, their assisting team, the non-business team, maybe? What things do they need access to and what things don't they need access to?
It's got to be right sized to the job. So if and let's use an example, David. If my job is recall coordinator, so I'm the person who's booking hygiene appointments for your office, what you need to do is sit there and say, what do I need to do for that job? And the answer is, obviously, I need to be able to book appointments. I need to be able to move appointments. I need to be able to see patient balances because I don't want to reappoint somebody who owes the practice $4,000 for the last 9 months and doesn't seem to have any plan to pay it. I need to be able to see clinical notes because if somebody is a garbage mouth, then, I probably should be able to see that and say to them, just based on the notes I'm seeing, it's really, really important that you come in and we have a look at you. But I don't need to adjust balances. I don't need to post payments. I certainly don't need admin rights, as Brittany said a minute ago. So it's about looking at each job and saying, all right, what does their job need and tailoring to that. And does that take a little bit of time? Absolutely, it does. On the other hand, that's a process you probably only need to do every 3 or 4 years.
What's interesting, though, is now with the staffing shortage and with the way some coaches recommend for teams is this whole concept of cross training. So hygienists should be checking out patients, assistants should be checking out the dental patients, and everybody should be able to kind of pick up everybody else's role and responsibility. I don't know if, and I see the value of that, and I think that could be really useful and efficient, but I'm not sure if people are realizing that they could be making themselves vulnerable to embezzlement when, if you did just provide rights to those who have, stay in your lane, you're clinical, this is what you do, versus you're now kind of doing everything. I think that we need to be thinking about that.
Yeah, and if you are a hygienist and part of your job is to check patients out, to me, Pam, that's just one input into what privileges you have. I think what Brittany was saying a minute ago, though, is that a lot of practices just use the shotgun, and this is just way too much work to think about. So we're just going to give everybody all the privileges they ever might need without being the least bit selective.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, Pam, tell me like your thoughts on this as a clinician, and an owner. Like, I think most dentists, it just never crosses their mind. It's like, here's my practice management software. It's set up this way. It defaults a certain way. So this is the way I'm just supposed to do it. And no one's ever had the conversation that we're having right now with them to say, hey, cool thing. You can customize this thing and use it the way you want.
Well, I agree. And also, you have to watch when and where you log in. So nowadays, I only log in my private office. Back in the day, if I was the first one in the office and I wanted to see the schedule, I would open up the schedule in the lab. So now I've logged in and my login is open all day. And so, anybody could access anything they want. So nowadays, I just sit back and do nothing. I let somebody else log in the operatories and in the lab and in Steri, like any place we have a workstation, because I know that I have carte blanche and not everybody else does. And so we have to be really careful because I think sometimes from a convenience standpoint, we just log in because we want to see the schedule in that room in that moment. Meanwhile, you've now just, have everything wide open for anybody who happens to walk by.
Maybe I can suggest an alternate approach that would work. What we encourage practice owners to do is to actually have 2 login accounts. And one of them should be what I'll call an operator account. In other words, the same level of privilege as say, a front desk receptionist. The second login account is the admin one. When you look at what you do all day, the vast majority of stuff you're going to do on the computer does not require an admin account. So what you should be routinely logged in as is that operator account. And what that means, Pam, is if you walk away from that terminal, whether it's your private office or the one in the operatory, it's not like leaving a loaded pistol there.
It's a
And
great
then
point.
when you actually need admin privileges to do something, you log out of your operator account, you log into your admin account. The other approach that you can use is there are biometric devices, proximity devices that you can carry around with you, and it will basically log you in and out of a terminal when you're within like 8 feet of it. So that's the other approach. But what I'd suggest in general is have 2 logins for yourself, and obviously they need different passwords. Don't commingle the passwords, please.
Ugh, the passwords, changing the passwords. It's so hard.
So
I
many,
feel like
so many.
it's such a should work out. Okay. So let's talk about prevalence, right? Because I love living in denial. Like I really do. Like I want to be like, oh, that really sucks for those that happened to. Hope it never happens to me, and I'm just going to pretend it never will. And I think many dentists share that sentiment because that's the easy way to go. When you have dentists reach out to you, how often is it embezzlement or is there sometimes just like poor record keeping?
We definitely see both, and superficially, they're sometimes a little hard to differentiate. About 70% of the calls we get ultimately result in embezzlement.
Mm.
So it's not a small number. And the other 30%, some of those people never really expected to find embezzlement in the first place, and they just want reassurance. And that's okay too. Brittany, I haven't been keeping track of your batting average since you started with us, but
It's not great. Most of my cases have been no embezzlement found, which is great for the client. I'm in the process of writing my embezzlement found case. So it's been with you about a year part-time now. And so I got my first embezzlement case, which for me was exciting, for the doctor, not so much. So there's that. But it's what I've been finding with my non-embezzlement cases, it's an office manager that's been there for 25 years. And this is how I do things. And now I know these patients and I've known them for 25 years. So they're my friends and I'm not collecting from them, or I'll send them a bill. I'm going to spend 45 minutes chit-chatting and not checking outstanding claims. They're just having that patient interaction and they're becoming friends with the patients and their actual job duties. So there's no embezzlement, but it's time theft. At the end of the day, it's, a different type of theft.
yeah. So a big phenomenon that we see is something called unauthorized adjustments. And that's when staff aren't stealing the money, but they're just letting patients off the hook from paying what they're supposed to. And it might be the situation where a patient's treatment gets submitted to their insurance company and it gets denied, and the follow-up never happens. And then the claim gets stale dated, and at the end of that, the staff member doesn't want to go to the doctor and say, hey, I screwed up. The insurance company asked for perio probing and I never sent them, and now it's too late to send the claim. Like it may be a pattern like that. But unauthorized write-offs cost the doctor exactly the same amount of money as if somebody stole it. It just doesn't fit squarely into that box called embezzlement.
The old Robin Hood game. I'll tell you what, so my partner Mark and I, probably, it's got to be like 20 years ago now, sat down and ran reports on like how much dentistry we gave away, you know, because we're good people and we did that. We were shocked. Um, sort of a different topic, but I loved how you phrased it, Brittany, to say like time theft, because that's a thing. And the reality is, if you're listening here, you think it's just this little teeny thing, but those little teeny things add up. And who you're really robbing is the person who works to the left of you, the right of you, back there, up front, like where you're taking away from everyone's best life on your team. So with that, we talked about some things that were ways, things that help, as a dentist and a leader that I can do to help. But what are some things that you see the dentist doing that maybe hurt, like behaviors or actions that we just think are totally innocent and everyone's following our lead? Like, well, if he's doing it, or are those things?
There sure are. If a doctor cuts ethical corners, they open the door wide to being a victim of something. If you're cheating on your taxes, if you're taking cash payments that come in and you're putting them in your pocket, you're not telling the IRS, or you're having an extramarital affair with one of your team, and yes, it happens, or you're cutting corners with insurance, and you're doing tooth whitening, but you're billing it to insurance like it's endo. If you do any of those things, first of all, the message you send to your staff is it's okay to cheat.
Mm-hmm.
Secondly, you put yourself in a compromising position, because if they start doing something to you and you want to call them on the carpet for it, they say, okay, but I know you're cheating on your taxes. You might be better just to let me go than have me make a report to the IRS, and they'll have their people crawling all over you.
It's an excellent point.
Sounds like such a toxic freaking work environment if I ever heard one. Holy cow.
And yet it happens a lot. I remember distinctly, Pam, an embezzler who was also having an affair with the doctor. And what she said to me was, when he's deciding what to do about this, he should give a little bit of thought to what a divorce will cost him. So she walked away untouched.
So that makes me think that maybe we as practice owners have to make better choices. And I know right now it's hard. And I know pretty much everybody is looking for more team members. And it's almost a miracle when somebody shows up for an interview, as opposed to, maybe 6, 7 years ago, where you had options and you had time and you had the ability to, or you felt like you could be more selective. But I know David Harris, not David Rice, but David Harris, we've been talking about for years about vetting the team member. And would you share some tips that the practice owner needs to really consider before they hire somebody? Because you might be able to avoid this in the first place.
First of all, be proactive. If you are a practice owner, sooner or later, you're going to be looking for people, and it makes no sense to start that hunt the day somebody gives you their 2 days notice. One of the things that helps thieves get into practices is the fact that dentists do hiring in a hurry. And you all understand the concept of a short notice list when it applies to patients. Why aren't we applying the same kind of thinking to hiring? In the case of Brittany, for example, I knew that I was going to hire you long before I had a place for you. It took a while for that feeling to become reality, but we are always lining up people for future openings. A dentist should do exactly the same thing. And when you meet somebody at a conference, or maybe you're out at a restaurant on a Friday night and you have a server who gives you really good service and anticipates and has good verbal skills, and you could see them as part of your practice, hand them a business card. You know, you're great at your job as a server, but if you ever wanted an alternative career, I'd love to talk to you about working in dentistry. Let's become collectors of people so that we're not doing it all in a panic. In terms of screening, yeah, there's a lot that can happen, and unfortunately, in most dental practices, I see very little of it actually happening. A statistic that every one of your audience should hear is that 70 million Americans, which is 1 in 4 adults, has a criminal record. If you hire without doing a criminal record check, you are playing Russian roulette and you will lose sooner or later. Drug testing. It absolutely amazes me that the norm in most dental practices is that we do not drug test applicants before we hire them. The DEA has given your profession the keys to the drugstore. If I have a drug problem, where would I like to work? Well, maybe a perio practice, an oral surgery practice, because controlled substance prescriptions go out of there the way candy leaves my house on October 31st. And nobody's going to notice a couple of extra scripts for me each day. So we should be drug testing. We absolutely need to talk to former employers. And I have a really simple rule. I want to talk to everybody this person's worked for at least the past 5 years. And let me give you a pro tip. And Brittany, I think you know what's coming. Do not ever phone any phone number that any applicant gives you. If they say that they worked for Dr. David Rice, Google is really cheap to use. Go online, find Dr. Rice's office online and call that phone number, and then you'll actually speak with Dr. Rice. There have been a whole lot of people who have gotten jobs because either the reference is never called in the first place, or if somebody does call a number the applicant gives them, they end up talking to the applicant's uncle who's pretending to be Dr. Rice and gives a good reference.
Crazy.
So start there. And actually, I skipped over something really, really basic. When you're interviewing an applicant, check their ID. If you have baggage and you want to hide the baggage, one of the easiest ways to do it is to pretend to be somebody else. And if the trust factor that Brittany mentioned a few minutes ago is there when it probably shouldn't be, you don't check for ID. I have a brother who's got a criminal record about 4 feet long. And he's in prison right now, but he's probably going to get out at the end of this month and he'll look for a job. If you saw his record, you wouldn't hire him. And he knows that. So one of the easiest things for him to do is pretend to be me. He knows
That's
my
a
birthday.
staggering number.
He knows my social security number, probably. You know, he could pretend to be me and get a job.
1 in 4
Mhm.
blows me away. And all right, Pam. So all the things on those lists, how many would you say you've routinely done in the past?
Oh my gosh. Honestly, this whole conversation, I'm like just shrinking. I'm like, didn't do that, don't do that, haven't done that, don't print my reports. I have so much I have to improve upon in my life. So no, I feel like I don't. I feel like I definitely look through who they worked for. And if I know them, I'm like, oh, cool, I can call that dentist and get a real account on what's going on. But no, I can't say I've called everybody for the past 5 years. And I can't say I've done my due diligence on a lot of things. Fortunately, I'd say most of my employees came word of mouth. So they weren't necessarily somebody that worked, like found them blindly on Indeed and just sort of hired them. I feel like there was like kind of a different way that they made their way into my office, thankfully. Haven't background checked, haven't drug tested. No, there's lots of things that, you know, I haven't done. So don't feel bad out there if you haven't done it. But also, I know another thing that I've heard is it's not really a question of if you get embezzled upon or stolen from. It's really a question of when, right? Because 70% of people that you speak with, it's embezzlement. But how many people are you not speaking with that are getting robbed every day?
A lot. And unfortunately, that's one of those unquantifiables, Pam. We have no idea. The statistics from the American Dental Association tell us that roughly half of dentists have already been stolen from. Half of those have been stolen from more than once. And it's a pretty good bet that half of the rest will get stolen from sooner or later. So the majority of your profession will be embezzled. And, we see it when we talk to live audiences. I mean, I don't ask for a show of hands of, how many have been stolen from or how many know somebody who's been stolen from, but those numbers are high.
I can't even fathom what those numbers are. And especially Pam, you bringing up like the challenges today where for many practices, there's a bit of a revolving door, people coming in and out. So it's probably people who do this over long periods of time and dentists don't notice. And there are people who probably come in and they quick hit and they move on and they quick hit and they move on. But you guys gave us a really solid list of things we can be doing on the front end, things we can be doing on a daily basis, and things to pay attention to and like pass that mirror test to not do. So incredibly helpful, Pam.
Yeah. And I think another thing, which I feel like we have to mention because I'm a little obsessed with it, is your wall of fame. I mean, shame, wall of shame, not fame, shame
Ooh,
with an SH. Prosperident has a wall of shame. So people who've been convicted of theft, I mean, they literally get out of jail and they'll go get a job down the street in a dental office because we don't do our due diligence. So I think that could you share a little bit about the wall of shame? And also, I think if we, things that make you go, maybe we should pick up the phone and have a conversation with one of you guys.
yeah.
We're best known for our investigation work, and that's the majority of what we do. The growth part of our business is our proactive work with clients. In other words, about lowering their risk of being embezzled in the future. And we have 3 of our team who concentrate on that area. And it's just like dentistry. If I went to either of you as a patient and said, David, I want to spend the least money in my lifetime on my teeth, what should I do? You'd say prevention, brush and floss like you mean it. See my hygienist every 6 months or maybe even ideally every 3 months, because the cost and the intrusiveness of those things is a whole lot less than you sitting in my chair for hours while I fix what you broke. And I'll say the same thing here, putting the systems in place and the stuff we've talked about today is the tip of the iceberg, but there are a lot of things that a practice owner can do that don't cost a lot of money and don't take a lot of time. So prevention is definitely the key. As to our Hall of Shame, yeah, we have 800 odd embezzlers permanently enshrined in our Hall of Shame. They're searchable by city, by name, by any attribute you can think of. We try to always capture pictures of these people and put them there because sometimes somebody will use a different name when they're applying. And yeah, 4 or 5 times a year, I'll get a call from somebody who says, yeah, I was kind of browsing on your Hall of Shame last night and my office manager's there. What should I do next? And I say, well, fire them to start with. And then, let's investigate and see what really happened.
Oh, that's a lot of people doing a lot of bad things, and full circle, all the bad people we don't even know about that are out there, for goodness sakes.
The only unfortunate thing is omission. Brittany mentioned a few minutes ago, she's just wrapping up a case now where she's found theft. And unfortunately, that person is not yet in our Hall of Shame and may not be for a year or 2. We will wait until that matter enters the public domain. So when they're charged of a crime, which might take 6 months or a year from now, we will put that person in our Hall of Shame. But in the next year, probably they're wandering around looking for employment maybe at your practice, without any public record of what they've done.
So what's the best way for people to reach out to you, learn how to prevent these things, learn how to hopefully manage what's happening if it is happening?
The best place to start is our website, which is just www.prosperident.com. People can also call us. We have a toll-free number, which is 888-398-2327. Again, 888-398-2327, and they can reach out either of those ways and tell us what they want to accomplish. They can tell us what what their concern or what their objective is, and we will work with them in all kinds of ways to get them there.
Well, thank you guys so much. I feel like this is so, it's interesting and it's a little scary and it's disheartening, but we have to arm ourselves with the knowledge of what we need to do. And I know from our conversations that we've had before, Brittany and David, that we can't share everything, right? There's so much more to know and there's so much more to learn. I know David's written a few books about it, but again, you really need to like be in his classes or talk to them, because the problem is if David outlines a whole thing of things to do, criminals are going to read it and they're going to find something else. And so there's always a workaround everything else. So we need to kind of be on top of that. So definitely use your resources and, do what you need to do to protect your practice, because gosh, it could cost you thousands and in some cases millions of dollars. So David, Brittany, thank you so much for joining us this week. I'm so happy to have this conversation with you, and it's always a pleasure to see you. David, I don't know where the time goes, but here we are again.
It's crazy. So yes, thanks again for being here, gang. Thanks everybody for listening in, watching if you're on the YouTube side of this. We will see you all next week.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you everyone for watching or listening to the show this week, and thanks to our guests and sponsors on this episode.
Please check out our social media at Dr. Pamela_Maragliano and at Dental Economics Official.
Or you can check me out at Ignite DDS or at Dr. David Rice.
And go to dentaleconomics.com to receive dental economics. You can choose to receive DE in print or digitally, and you can also get the details of our Principles of Practice Management conference on our website.
If you have topics or guests or anything you'd like to talk about on the show, send us an email to dentistryunmaskedpodcast@gmail.com, and we will do our very best to make it happen. Thanks again, and we'll see you next week.